Do you know why there needed to be a new covenant? I mean, did God get it wrong the first time? Yeah, well, it didn't work, yeah. God made a promise to Abraham. Okay, he made a promise. That's not going to work. He made a promise that there would be blessing to Abraham and to the world through him. A promise is a promise. You don't make a promise and then say, well, I've changed my mind. You're only going to get it if you do something. You promised, right? In the Bible, God makes the promise, and then he adds the law, which is what? If, then. If you do something, then what? You get blessed. Do you see the issue? I thought he promised it. How can he add conditions? Well, he adds this covenant, and by the way, Israel agrees to it. They say, yep, sure, okay, we'll do everything you say. Why didn't they hearken back to the promise and say, God, you promised, and we're going to trust you because we can't do all the things you said? Now, that would have required some spiritual understanding, which they didn't have yet, nor would you have if you were there, because God hadn't revealed Romans yet, right? And so you still think, yes, you're God, I'm just a man, I will obey, right? We haven't learned the lesson, as the law would teach us, that none of us can, right? But he has the law. So if the law says if, it's conditioned on the blessing, but God actually promised first the blessing, then what needs to happen? This is a covenant. We need a better covenant. Because when, not if, when men fail, it will negate the promise, right? The only way for that promise to be fulfilled is if there's a better covenant. Thus, the new covenant, right? The new covenant where God will take that law and put it in the hearts of people. He will do that by his Spirit and cause them to do what they could not do before so that they could get the blessing. Do you see why the new covenant's needed? For God to keep his promise to Abraham. Thus, all the prophets and the law spoke of the necessity for this new covenant, right? Now, as Hebrews explains, well, let's read Jeremiah 31 first. Jeremiah 31, verse 31. Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. And we are in the Old Testament when this is talking about this. Right, this is Jeremiah. This is before Israel's destroyed even. And by the way, this isn't the first time the new covenant shows up in the Old Testament. It goes back to Deuteronomy. In the law given to Moses, God makes a promise of a better thing, knowing that it would fail. It's interesting when you read the law, and you shouldn't skip that section as just dry legalese, because there's some interesting things in there. Like in the law, God says, when you disobey, like it's a paraphrase, when you disobey, do this. Oh. Like he's not just saying when you disobey, you get cursed. He's saying when you disobey, do this to help yourself out. Like he's saying, when you fail to do that which you said, here's some help for you. He's promising in the law more help. Like he's giving them advice, right? And so Jeremiah 31 says, he's going to give a new covenant to the house of Israel and the house of Judah. He doesn't mention in verse 31 the Gentiles. Why? He made a promise to Abraham that his seed would be a blessing to the Gentiles. See? They'd be a blessing to the Gentiles. They can't be a blessing to the Gentiles without getting blessed. Under the law, they can't get blessed unless they do, which they can't. So what happens to the Gentiles? They don't get blessed either, right? What's the new covenant allow? Blessing for Israel and Gentiles, right? Do you see that? So God always had in his purview the blessing of Gentiles, just like he had in his purview the blessing, the special blessing of Israel. The old covenant couldn't do it. The new covenant would fulfill it, okay? When Jesus spoke about the cross, he was speaking about Jeremiah 31, verse 31, that it's not according to the covenant that I made with your fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. That's Moses' covenant, which covenant they break. Verse 33 says, this shall be the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after those days, saith the Lord. I will put my law in their inward parts. You thought the old covenant was the law and the new covenant was not the law. That's incorrect. The old covenant is the law, the new covenant is the law, but they could not do. They had no power to do under the old covenant. The new covenant gives them the power to do. It changes them. And he says, I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and will be their God, and they shall be my people. They shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, saith the Lord, which is saying something. As we said earlier this morning, it's never been a novel thought that everyone who says they're God's people or Christian or Israel is actually that. The same true here, but the new covenant, that will no longer be a problem. Under the new covenant, it will no longer be a problem that everyone says they do, but not everyone does. Under the new covenant, they all will. Isn't that kind of strange when people think that they're in the new covenant today? I mean, point to that. Point to a single church, denomination, group of people who say they're Christians that you think everybody in the group really is. It's going to be hard, right? God knows, but we know this to be the case. What was it, 70? Was it now 70%? It used to be 80 or 90. 70% of people in America say they're Christians, and it's dropping. But do you really think everyone is a Christian? The answer is no. But, well, it says here in the new covenant, they all know the Lord. Something's not happening. He says, they all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, saith the Lord, for I will forgive their iniquity, I will remember their sin no more. How does their sin get forgiven? Under the old covenant. The blood of bulls and goats. When you sin, you bring an animal offering and sacrifice to the priest. The priest imputes your sin to this animal and slaughters the animal to God to atone for your sin, teaching the principle that sin is worthy of death and requires blood for forgiveness, and this innocent animal is taking your place. What's that sound like? The cross. And it's been taught rightly in many churches, that sounds like the cross to me. It sounds like the cross. It should be. That's the shadow of the cross. That's the preaching of that as a substitution.